Oh, there we go. That works. Okay, so it's 9:30. So I think we'll get started, try to be on time for our first meeting of the Environment and Climate Change Committee. Just wanted to start off with some opening remarks. It's going to be a busy term for us. So I'm really looking forward to working with all the members of the committee. And we've got a lot on the forward agenda here. If you've received a briefing on solid waste master plan or the resiliency plan or climate change master plan or around trees, all those files are with us. And of course, infrastructure, water services. So we've got a very, very busy term this term, and I'm looking forward to working with all members. I also want to recognize we're on unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin territory as we hold this meeting in City Hall in Chambers or in the Champlain Room. I will start just by mentioning Councillor Brockington has indicated that he will not be able to attend today's Environment and Climate Change Protection meeting. And so he's away, but I think back for council on Wednesday. I believe we'll go to roll call now. Get a roll call.
Councillor Luloff.
Present.
Councillor Hill. Present. Councillor Curry.
Here.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Present.
I can see her on the screen.
Present. Present.
Councillor Devine.
Here. Chair, we may be having a sound issue with our remote participants, so if you want to just hold for a moment, we'll check into that. Thanks.
Good.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me?
Test on my end here.
Are you at home, Teresa? I don't know if they can hear us in the room though.
I can hear you, Teresa.
Okay. I can hear you.
Poor Sean, eh? We just want to start things off on the right foot, and here we are.
Here, I believe we can hear our remote participants now. If we could just have perhaps Councillor Kavanaugh say a few words for us.
Hello there from beautiful Bay Ward. You got that?
We can hear you loud and clear. Thanks so much. We can hear folks online now. So I think what we'll do is we'll go through the roll call again, and starting with Councillor Luloff.
Councillor Luloff.
Very present. Hello.
Excellent. So Councillor Hill.
EC.
Councillor Curry.
Here.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Present.
Councillor Devine.
Present.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor Brockington's away. Councillor Brown.
Here.
Vice Chair Carr.
Here.
And you have quorum, Mr.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay, seeing none. Are the minutes of the Standing Committee on Environment Protection, Water and Wastewater Management meeting of Tuesday, the 21st of June, 2022 carried? Thank you.
Great.
Our minutes, one of the Joint Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management and Agricultural and Rural Affairs meeting of Monday, 27th of June, 2022 carried. Thank you for that. The Environment and Climate Change Committee terms of reference are on the agenda here. There's been no speakers that have registered. There is no correspondence. Any discussion on this item? Anyone want to raise any issues? Okay, is this item carried? Thank you. Oh, sorry about that. Councillor Kavanaugh online.
Yeah, no, I don't have any problems with the terms of reference, but I wondered if there's anything in the cards for having joint meetings, since we don't want to work in silos, possibly with transportation. I don't know, I haven't mentioned this to the chair of transportation, but just throwing that out, it just strikes me that we're in a committee that affects everything, but transportation is probably the biggest subject.
Yeah, it's a great point. There are some overlapping issues here, certainly, with transportation. We were actually just talking with clerk's office about the high performance development standard as well. And there's some overlap there between our committee and planning and housing. So I think how we'll deal with it is as those items come up, we'll either work with the other chairs of the other committees, Councillor Tierney on transportation or Councillor Leeper on planning and housing, and have either joint meetings where there's an item that overlaps with the two, or those chairs will collectively decide which committee those items might belong at. So did talk to the clerk's office about this, and it's a good point. We do overlap with a number of other committees. So certainly on our agenda and on our radar. Appreciate that intervention, Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank
okay,
you.
so with that, is this item carried? Thank you. The 2023 draft operating and capital budget environment climate change committee. So we have a number of delegations today. We have 9 delegations for this, and there's a staff presentation. So we'll hold that item. And I just wanted to make a note on the IPD on today's agenda. We've got the annual drinking water source protection status update on our agenda today. And so the discussion with staff is that they'll be coming back to committee in April with the summary report. And so you're going to get information on a short report and presentation in April on the quality of drinking water sources in Ottawa and the quality of the tap water. So just a good presentation, I think, to start off the term. And for councillors that haven't seen this, it's important to see this. So I think in April, we'll see that come up. If there is anybody that wants to hold this item now, as I say, come up in April. So any questions or comments on that, IPD? Okay, perfect. So I think with that, we'll go to staff for the presentation on the draft operating and capital budget. Then we'll have the motions introduced from Councillor Carr, and then we'll go to delegations. So over to you, Tammy Rose.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair and members of the Environment and Climate Change Committee. For those of you who haven't met me yet, my name is Tammy Rose, and I'm the General Manager of Infrastructure and Water Services Department. I'm pleased to be here with you today as we present the draft 2023 budget. Now, I'd like to introduce a few of my fellow presenters and colleagues that are here with us today. We have Cyril Rogers, the Interim Chief Financial Officer and General Manager of Finance and Corporate Services. We have Ellison Downs, the Director of Parks, Maintenance and Forestry. Shelley McDonald, the Director of Solid Waste Services. Marilyn Journeau, speaking on behalf of Water, Wastewater and Stormwater Operations. Sue Johns, the Director of Asset Management, and David Wise, the Director of Economic Development and Long Range Planning. Also available to answer questions today is Karina Duclos, the Director of Infrastructure Services and the Capital Project Implementation, and Jen Nielsen, the Director of Water Treatment and Facilities. We also have many staff here today from Forestry Services, Solid Waste Services, the Climate Change and Resiliency team, and the Natural Systems team to answer any and all of your questions. Next slide, please. La présentation d'aujourd'hui sera axée sur l'examen des budgets de fonctionnement et des immobilisations qui sont financés par les recettes fiscales.
Today's presentation will be dealing with the charges regarding the Environment and Climate Change Committee. After the presentation, we will hear the delegations and then ask questions to staff.
As they pertain to the Environment and Climate Change Committee. Following that, we will have public delegations and then questions to staff. Next slide, please. Included in the draft tax supported budget and reporting to this committee are the following areas. From Infrastructure and Water Services Department, the Office of the General Manager and Business and Technical Support Services, Infrastructure Services and Asset Management Services. From the Planning, Real Estate and Economic Development Department, the Resiliency and Natural Systems Policy, Climate Change and Resiliency team, and from Public Works, Solid Waste Services and Forestry Services. I'll now turn the presentation over to Cyril.
Thank you, Tammy. Good morning, Chair, members of the Environment and Climate Change Committee. You can go to the next slide. The overall 2023 draft net requirement for the tax-supported Environment and Climate Change Committee is $66.3 million. And this reflects an increase of $6.3 million over the 2022 budget. The GM office, BTSS, Infrastructure and Asset Management Services, is increasing by $225K. This is mainly associated to cost of living increments and benefits, and there is some offsets in terms of recoveries from capital. The resiliency and natural systems policy budget is increasing by $280K. Again, this is mainly attributed to cost of living and benefit increases, and there is some one-time funding in this budget for the distributed energy resource framework and increase in community environment projects and funding for wildlife fire risk mapping. On the solid waste side, the budget is increasing by $5 million. Again, this is due to cost of living adjustments, inflationary pressures, and increases related to the garbage, recycling, and organics collection contracts. Forestry services increases of $655,000 is related to cost of living and inflationary pressures. Next slide, please. The draft 2023 capital budget for the tax component of this committee is $45.6 million. $36 million is allocated to the solid waste program for landfill disposal stage 5, land and trail road expansion and long-term planning. New this year in the environment section is a $5 million investment dedicated for climate change. In addition to this annual increase in budget for 2023, we've also enhanced the reporting for climate change overall in all city budgets. My colleagues will speak a little bit later to that in the presentation. There's also $3 million allocated to the energy management and investment strategy for 2023. Next slide. The overall funding for the capital program is $35.3 million, or 78% through cash or capital reserves. There's $9.7 million, or 21% funded through debt. Next slide, please. I will now pass it over to Allison.
These are the highlights of the Forest Services operating budget. Le budget inclut un redressement pour les ajustements potentiels du coût de la vie, des augmentations d'échelon et des prestations pour 2023. Il y a 1,7 million.
There's $1.7 million for the forestry tree planting program, $13.2 million for tree maintenance activities, and $180,000 for the cost share external tree planting programs. And finally, there's an increase in application fees for distinctive tree permits.
Next slide, please.
Shelley?
Solid waste services total operating budget will be
Le budget total pour les déchets solides est de 113 millions. En plus des ajustements pour les augmentations du coût de la vie, les augmentations de salaire, on inclut également l'inflation et les pressions exercées par la croissance pour le recyclage et le programme de collecte des bacs verts. Il y aura une augmentation de 12 $ par ménage ainsi que 6 $ par ménage dans les multirésidentiels. Donc, ceci est attribuable à l'augmentation des contrats pour la collecte en bordure de la chaussée et dans les immeubles multirésidentiels. Il faudra également une augmentation de 4 $ pour la collecte en bordure de la chaussée et 2 $ pour le multirésidentiel. Et maintenant, nous passons au volet taux.
So the 2023 draft rate budget consists of drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater services. This budget is developed in accordance with the Long-Range Financial Plan 5, which has been adopted by Council. The overall budget does include approximately $8 million in increases across the 3 service areas, mainly attributed to cost of living increments and inflationary pressures. There's an overall increase of $9.6 million to support the capital program. This program is a very capital intensive program from a rate support perspective in the assets. In addition, next slide, please. On the capital side, the capital authority is for 2023 is $343 million. This includes the rate funded component of the integrated road, water and sewer program. Infrastructure renewal makes up approximately 91% of the total 2023 rate supported capital budget. The budget is funded from water, wastewater, stormwater reserves, development charges, new debt, and government grants. In 2023, the annual debt repayments for water, wastewater, and stormwater services is around 11% of the city's own source revenues for these areas. This is well within the 15% debt limit established by council. Next slide, please. The overall program is 243.5 million is funded from cash reserves, or 71%. 78.7 million, or 23%, is funded from debt, and 15.3 million, or 4%, is funded through development charges, with the remaining 5.3 million, or 2%, funded from revenue sources such as the municipal drain program. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Cyril. Highlights of the operating budgets includes an adjustment for potential 2023 cost of living increases, increments, and benefits and adjustments. The budget also includes an increase to the contribution to capital of $300,000 for water, $805,000 for wastewater, and $8.45 million for stormwater. Je vais maintenant passer la parole à ma collègue Sue Johns, directrice gestion.
Sue Johns will now be taking over.
The draft 2023 budget includes $342.8 million of capital investment to renew, grow our drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure that delivers essential service to our residents, businesses, and visitors. The city's drinking water infrastructure continues to be in good condition. For the last 5 years, the city has achieved at least a 98% rating from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation, and Parks. All of the city's infrastructure assets are safe. The total replacement value of drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater services is $42 billion. That's just more than half of our total asset portfolio. The city is responsible for maintaining and renewing over 9,270 kilometers of water mains and sewers, 2 water purification plants, 1 wastewater treatment plant, 55 remote wastewater pumping stations, 16 remote drinking water pumping stations, 14 stormwater pumping stations, 6 communal well systems, and over 6,300 culverts. Next slide. Oh, no, that's the same slide. Back. Thank you. Previous slide, please. Thank you. I'll now provide a summary of the investments included in the draft capital budget that are funded from rate. In the drinking water services, the total investment exceeds $70 million. There's over $20 million to renew the 2 water purification plants, with funding to build a new intake at the structure at the Lemieux Island plant, and to replace and upgrade equipment at both plants, Britannia and Lemieux. There's close to $55 million to replace and repair water mains to ensure a continued supply of quality drinking water. The integrated road, water, and wastewater program includes over $110 million investment for the rate-funded share of that program. And the integrated water and wastewater program includes $19 million to renew water and wastewater infrastructure, which is $10 million to repair, rehabilitate, and improve sewers. Next slide, please. In stormwater services, the total investment is around $40 million. This includes over $15 million to replace and repair culverts across the city, and $1.5 million to rehabilitate storm and surface water infrastructure, including creeks, rivers, and ravines, to stabilize slopes and mitigate flooding. Wastewater services investment is $102.5 million, which is more than $23 million to renew pumping stations, sewage pumping stations, almost $60 million for life cycle work at the Robert O. Pickard Environmental Center, $3.3 million to upgrade the pumping station in Richmond, $1 million investment in the Ottawa River Action Plan and the Wet Weather Infrastructure Master Plan, funded $600,000 from stormwater and $400,000 from wastewater. This concludes the summary of investments included in the draft capital budget that are funded from rate. I'll now pass the presentation to David Weiss.
Well, thank you, Susan. Overall, the 2023 budget includes more than $52 million in new investments with moderate or major climate change contributions. More than $30 million of those investments are expected to reduce greenhouse gas emissions beyond the energy evolution business as usual planned scenario, and $22 million of investments are expected to make a moderate or a major contribution towards building climate resiliency here in Ottawa. Budget 2023 proposes, in addition, a $5 million spending plan to support the implementation of the Climate Change Master Plan, including continuing work on the energy evolution strategy and the climate resiliency strategy. The 2023 draft capital budgets have been enhanced with the application of a climate change lens for the very first time ever to provide information on relevant impacts from climate-related capital investments. The purpose of applying this climate lens to the budget process was to better understand how the city is investing to implement the Climate Change Master Plan, how we are proposing to reduce emissions, and also increase Ottawa's resilience to current and future impacts related to climate change. Again, this is the very first year that a climate change lens has ever been applied to new capital budget requests and is a significant step towards building a climate change accounting framework to support future decisions as we move forward. Future budgets will be proposed to build upon this exercise, including establishing a carbon budget as we go forward. The draft budget 2023 also includes new investments, which are being supported by several other committees beyond ECC. These include $23.3 million to purchase zero-emission 40-foot buses. That is part of the bus replacement program, and that will be considered by Transit Committee, of course. The $3 million for energy management and investment strategy, that will be looking at implementing new energy conservation measures in existing city facilities to upgrade them and provide more efficiency with respect to those facilities. We're also looking at investments to improve electrical vehicle charging stations at parking lots and garages, and investments to transition the city's municipal fleet to zero emissions, including $240,000 for 4 new electric vehicles for our building code services fleet. We also have additional investments that are expected to build climate resiliency, and these include $582,000 to continue to update the city's floodplain mapping with our Conservation Authority partners, $1 million for the wet weather program to continue to develop a coordinated approach to wet weather flow management within the urban area and reduce our flood risks, $4.5 million for slope stabilization of the Ottawa River alongside Ottawa Road 174 to protect against erosion during significant spring runoff, and $12.2 million for integrated infrastructure renewal projects that reduce combined sewer overflows and heavy rains, protect the Ottawa River, and safeguard against the risk of basement flooding. So with that, I believe that wraps up the presentation from this group, and we'll be happy to move to questions.
Okay, thank you so much for that presentation. So I think what we'll do is go to Councillor Carr, Vice Chair Carr, to read in the 2 roadmap motions for the operating and capital budget. And then after that, we'll move to delegations with Keller first. So Councillor Carr, Vice Chair Carr, over to you.
Be it resolved that the Environment and Climate Change Committee recommend that Council, sitting as Committee of the Whole, approve the Environment and Climate Change Committee 2023 tax-supported draft operating and capital budget as follows. Number 1, Infrastructure and Water Services Department Infrastructure and Asset Management Service as follows. User fees, page 2. Operating resource requirement, page 1. Number 2, Planning, Real Estate and Economic Development Department Resiliency and Natural Systems Policy Operating Resource Requirement. Number 3, Public Works Department Solid Waste Services as follows. User fees, operating resource requirements. Number 4, Public Works Department Forestry Services as follows. User fees, operating resource requirement. Number 5, Environment and Climate Change Committee tax-supported capital budget on page 14. Individual projects listed on pages 30 to 33, environment, and pages 35 to 43, solid waste. And the second motion, which is the rate supported. Be it resolved that the Environment and Climate Change Committee recommends that Council, sitting as Committee of the Whole, approve the Environment and Climate Change Committee 2023 rate supported draft operating capital budget as follows. Number 1, Infrastructure and Water Services Department Drinking Water Services as follows. A, user fees, pages 3 to 7. B, operating resource requirement, page 2. Number 2, wastewater services as follows. A, user fees, pages 10 to 11. B, operating resource requirements, page 9. 3, stormwater, laboratory and municipal drainage services as follows. A, user fees, pages 14 to 17. B, operating resources requirements, page 13. 4, the Environment and Climate Change Committee rate-supported capital budget on pages 18 to 24. Individual projects listed on pages 38 to 66, drinking water services, 68 to 71, integrated water and wastewater rate portion, 73 to 94, wastewater services, and 96 to 120, stormwater services.
Okay, thank you very much, Vice Chair. I know there's a notice of motion later on, motions that councillors want to put on the table now, online or in person here. Okay, so then we'll move to the speakers. And the first is Angela Keller-Herzog. Angela.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, so we're just waiting for my visual presentation to come up. There it is. So my name is Angela Keller-Herzog, and I'm the Executive Director of CAFES, our Community Association Environmental Network here in Ottawa. Next slide, please. And I'm looking at 2 questions for this presentation. One aimed at whether this is a climate budget, and 2, are we doing enough to keep our city green? Most of you know CAFES. We've been around for over 10 years now. Next slide, please. We have a mandate to look at local initiatives to do environmental and climate advocacy, and also to keep the conversation going through networking and community building. Next slide, please. So that's an overview of my presentation. There's a lot of slides, so I'll be going fast. Next slide, please. When we're looking at climate these days, it's clear that we're not just looking at the energy transition and mitigation, but also adaptation. We've been seeing derechos, tornadoes, and so forth. Next slide, please. And on the question of if we are on track for our targets, the answer, I think, has to be no. We haven't really made that big bend in the curve. Question of whether this budget is helping or hindering, I think we don't have quite enough information to have a clear, easy answer on that. Next slide, please. We do have information, and we have done very good homework on understanding what are the very likely impacts of climate on the National Capital Region. So we're well positioned with that. Next slide, please. In terms of answering these questions, we reach for our favorite tool, and no, it's not a sonic screwdriver, it's the climate lens. This can be applied at least 3 different levels. We're very happy to see that the 22-26 governance review reaffirms that there's a mandatory climate lens, so that you councillors and the public, we have the information to know the impacts, climate impacts of major decisions. And for budget 2023, this impact analysis hasn't been done at an aggregate level. So that's like a missing thing by our own metrics. In terms of policies, we have been seeing more climate lens work, including for the official plan. And then at project, as a staff presentation has just told us, we are over the moon delighted to see that we've broken the ice, and we do have a start of a climate lens analysis at project level. So what does that look like? Next slide, please. So we're seeing that there is a rubric of looking at minor, moderate, and major contributions of a capital project in terms of emissions and in terms of risk. What is missing, and that's just a bit of a systematic blind spot, the tool doesn't really ask project managers to identify where the project is a significant increase in locking us into future emissions or increasing our climate risk. So I think this tool needs to be, it's great that we have it, but we could strengthen it. Next slide, please. And also, obviously, we'd like to have the data and the aggregation from the tool public. In terms of how much money there is in the budget for climate, that should be not $5, by the way, but 5 million. Sorry about that. We're very happy to see this money directly on budget as opposed to relying on the hydro surplus, which was a previous term of council source of funds. But looking at the overall money, by our calculation, if we have the 600 and something million annual funding and we allocate a municipal share of 1/3, we'd be looking for about 200 million. So the 5 million is far short of that. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so the last leg of my climate remarks is we really still need that long-term climate plan. We're talking about major amounts of money, major capital spending, and the climate doesn't yet have the tooling and the plan. Next slide, please. Oh, we're on green. Good. The budget needs to defend us against Bill 23. There are major green space threats and implications, and we haven't really seen the budget ratchet up on that front. Next slide, please. Next slide, yeah. In terms of being on track for the urban canopy and getting to 40% urban canopy, I'm still waiting for the next slide. I think we also would like to see more investments that we haven't seen. Next slide, please. In terms of the gray versus green investment ratio, that is a metric we'd like to see in the capital asset management strategy. And when we see that one single airport widening project that there's much opposition against is as much as the entire forestry service budget, we think that ratio needs to be revised in favor of green. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Rozog, any questions for the delegation? Okay, I'm seeing that. I know councillors have mentioned your presentation and have some questions they'll ask staff, Angela. So thank you for the presentation. I know those questions will come up. Appreciate being here.
Thank you.
Next up is Philippa McDonald with Cafes.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to start today by acknowledging that I am speaking to you on unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory, and I'd also like to thank the council for this opportunity. This is my first time delegating. Next slide, please. So I'm a fourth-year environmental studies and undergraduate student at Carleton University, and as a part of a course-based internship, I've been working with Cafes since early January to get practical skills and experience, with my focus being on the 2023 budget. And I wanted to speak to you today about 3 key impacts on the city's environmental resiliency that I've picked out by discussion with my peers and classmates. Next slide, please. So firstly, we know resiliency requires active public participation, and at the moment, only a small fraction of our city are joining the conversation because of the time and resources it takes to get involved. And I'd like to argue that even with the extensive educational resources and budget tutorials available on the city website, as well as environmental NGOs like Cafes or Horizon Ottawa, it still takes the average person much longer than it should to be able to make an informed opinion about any section of the city budget. And I know this from speaking with my peers that the lack of participation isn't due to a lack of caring or a lack of education. And I know this from speaking with, say, my 4 roommates. After they read the city budget at their leisure, after discussion with them, after I had put about 40-50 hours into looking through the city budget as well as different tutorials. And there's a lot of embedded information that is not clear at first glance. And it was only through my putting extensive time and analysis into the city budget that I was able to understand these things and communicate that with my peers. And I'm lucky that it's reading week this week, so I was able to join you. I didn't have to be in class, but the time frame that the city budget public engagement process is very short. And I think a large fraction of the city, like city citizens, do not have the time it takes to be able to make that informed decision. I want to highlight the great efforts of the council so far in engaging, especially students at Carleton University. I think the engagement with colleges and universities in particular is a really effective way to break barriers in advocating for a more inclusive city budget. Next slide, please. I want to talk briefly about Bill 23, as this is a recurring concern that I've discussed with a lot of my student peers. And because Bill 23 impacts the spatial design of our city, as we know, especially green space, and resiliency requires space. The reduced green space is a particular concern because it reduces our city's biodiversity. And at the very least, that prompts concerns about the longevity and sustainability of our local food system. Environmental resiliency directly impacts the resiliency of the community. And there are thousands of studies that support that access to green space provides mental and physical health benefits. It reduces strain on our healthcare system, and it fosters community connection, which in turn fosters resiliency. Bill 23, as far as I know, doesn't contain any discussion with or a discussion of partnership with builders and communities, which is essential for a resilient city. Next slide, please. And lastly, I want to highlight the success of securing the first climate change lens, as well as a budget in the 2023 city budget. It's a great start towards long-term financial investment in environmental resiliency of our city. And but we know there's still a long way to go. And without rapid investment, both the city and the citizens face substantially higher costs in damage control in the future. And we know this from the aftermath of the 2022 derecho storm that cost, from what I found, about 50 million between the city and Hydro Ottawa. And I don't think that includes the thousands and thousands lost by many small businesses, as well as many people that I know, including students, that lost thousands in food from lost power for extended periods of time, as well as property damage. There's extensive academic literature that can support Ottawa's transition towards an environmentally resilient community. And I know there's a large audience of students and citizens that want to support the efforts of this committee, but what we need is more support from you to ensure a resiliency lens is incorporated throughout the budget. But there's also more support towards a more inclusive budget process. That's all I have for you today. There are resources at the end of this slide. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Philippa. That's a great presentation. And just want to thank Carleton University students as well for so much engagement as of late. There's a lot of work together on things like divestment, greening the campus, a lot of overlap with transit services, transportation that this campus is working on and that students are working on that dovetails well with the city's goals too. So thank you for being engaged. I see Councillor Devine has a question for you.
Hello, not so much a question, Philippa, as much as a thank you. I definitely recognize what you were saying about how with the process we have and with the budget tools that are made public, it's not exactly always the easiest document to navigate, for myself included. What I do know about the 2024 process is that many councillors certainly hope that there will be greater time for the 2024 budget consultation process, which is going to begin very soon after we complete this 2023, that there will be a lot more time for citizen engagement such as yours. But I definitely want to thank you because yourself and the previous delegate, Angela Heller-Kurzog, definitely bring ideas to myself, at least that I will be asking staff of very, very shortly. So even though it's a rushed process, it's an effective one. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Philippa. I just wanted to ask you, you had some comments for us on the budget process in terms of engaging students. And I was wondering if you had some recommendation for us on how we could do things differently. It's one thing to come and say, this isn't working that well, but, I always look to students for how would it work better? You're so savvy in terms of getting, socializing, communicating in many different ways. So wondering if you have some suggestions.
I know students are a tough audience to crack, so your efforts so far are definitely really appreciated by us. I think the best thing that I've seen is visiting classrooms and starting that dialogue one-on-one. I think it really breaks the barriers. I know there's been a lot of that, and that's partly what got me engaged was those classroom visitations that kind of broke it down and made it a less intimidating process, because it is. And also, I know just in those public, starting sort of, there's different organizations like at Carleton, like the Climate Commons that kind of host workshops or public engagements that I think a lot of students attend. So joining those sort of already established organizations, I think could be a really great leeway into reaching the student audience. Yeah.
Thank you very much. If you have other ideas, I'd certainly like to hear them. And I just would encourage you to try to connect with some of the Carleton University groups in the Tech Park in Canada North, because the 4 schools that are there are very engaged in different projects, maybe specific projects, but I would encourage you to get in touch with them as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your delegation. Next up is Duncan Burry with Waste Watch Ottawa.
So thank you, Chair. Pleasure being here actually in person, for the first time in a long time. So a couple of questions on the solid waste budget. In June 21st of 2022, staff presented to the former Environment Committee an update on the transition of the blue and black box recycling program to individual producer responsibility, which is the new provincial model for funding and operating recycling programs. So given that the change is transitioning starting July 1st, which is just 4 months from now, we're wondering when staff will be reporting on the transition protocol, what actually that transition looks like. And secondly, what are the financial implications? So that's the first question. When will staff be reporting on this? This is a change which is going to start happening in just over 4 months. And we've heard nothing about the details of this or financial implications since this was discussed by the committee, former Environment Committee, last summer. The second one is regarding the actual cost of running the program. Recyclable materials revenues do not completely cover the cost of recycling program. And you cannot tell from the budget exactly what the cost of the recycling program is. So picking up on the comments of the previous delegation, it's very hard to figure out exactly what the recycling program costs. But you can find this information if you look at the Resource Productivity and Recovery Authority, which is a provincial agency, and their last full year of data published was 2021. And it suggests that in 2021, the net cost of running the program after the application of material recyclable revenues was 8.35 million. And this suggests, though, that Stewardship Ontario, which is the producer responsibility organization that covers roughly 50% of the net cost of the program, was probably paying roughly 4.2 million, and the city was paying an equivalent amount. So the question is, what are the long-term financial implications of a change to producer responsibility, given that the city will no longer have any financial or operational responsibilities to pay the existing 50% of the cost starting this July? Now, I do appreciate that there's a transition period, and this is perhaps subject to some discussions and negotiations, but in the long run, the city is not going to have to fund a relatively modest 4, 5, whatever it is, million a year in the cost to run the program, because that cost will now be borne entirely by producer responsibility organization through, I think, what's called Circular Materials Ontario. So in conclusion, quickly, whatever savings there are, and I appreciate they may not be completely clear at the moment, Waste Watch Ottawa would argue whatever that money is, however many millions that is, that money stay in the solid waste budget and be put forward to support the kind of options and waste diversion initiatives which are being considered through the solid waste master plan. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for that delegation. I'll look to see if anyone has questions here. Just in terms of the question around when that's coming back to committee, you can expect reports in the next 2 quarters. I know the transition, obviously July 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2025. Residents aren't going to notice a difference, as I understand it, in the first couple of years of that transition. But staff will be coming back very shortly to present on more information on that, as well as the solid waste master plan. Perhaps we can get a specific answer to you during the meeting. I know you're well versed with staff, so thanks for being here, Duncan. I do see a couple questions. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Duncan, for coming out. I just wondered if you had any suggestions in terms of making it more financially viable for waste management. It strikes me that here we go around the city and pick up stuff. We should be able to have returns on a lot of that. And we do get some from the recycle, but it's pitiful. I'm just looking for more suggestions. I know we have our big plan coming up, but I just want to hear from you.
I think Waste Watch Ottawa basically thinks that pretty much everything that's being talked about in the solid waste master plan is something the city should be doing, very broadly speaking, with exception being we don't need a new landfill and we don't need a big new incinerator, both of which would cost us $1/3 of $1 billion and maybe 10 years to find and site and start to operate. So I think there are a number of things, user pay, I know it's being discussed in the solid waste master plan. I think that would have an impact. I think there are a number of kind of initiatives, things like the city needs to be working on perhaps a program for textiles, which is being modeled. Markham does a very, very good program that we could copy very easily off the shelf. So there are all sorts of things I think need to be done. And I think we're looking forward to seeing the solid waste master plan. I gather that's going to be coming forward in the third quarter of this year. With a decision by council in I guess the beginning of next year. This is a critical period for solid waste in the city of Ottawa. We lost a good decade or more with Plasco and frankly a lot of inaction with the exception of putting in the green bin program in 2011, 2012. So there's a lot that needs to be done. I don't know if that answers your questions, Councillor Kevin. I hope so.
Yeah, it's hard to answer it in just a few minutes, but I appreciate it. Just looking for more direction from Waste Watch, and I appreciate all your work on it. Thanks, Duncan.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Curry.
You kind of partially answered this, but so if we kept this 4.5 million, what you're saying is that we would put it into more waste diversion options. So are the ones that you just listed there the ones you would recommend, or are there any others?
Well, just off the top, council last year agreed to roll out green bin program to multi-residential properties as a condition of garbage service. That needs to be funded. This doesn't happen on its own. There needs to be a lot of hand holding, I think, with building managers, tenants association, condo boards. I gather that there are some new staff resources that might be coming for that, but that needs to be funded properly and aggressively rolled out. It's a huge missing piece. When we brought green bins out, we did it for curbside residential only. And it was very belatedly decided last year to roll it out to multi-residential. It shouldn't be voluntary. I gather new buildings are having this option presented to them and staff are working with new buildings that are coming online, but there's a very large number of older buildings where there needs to be, staff resources and effort put into promotion and actually, working with these kind of residents to make this happen. So that's another example of that would be one of the priorities I would think would be something we should do with that money.
Okay, thank you for that presentation and have noted your questions as well. Tom Harris is up next, the Executive Director of ICSC Canada.
There we go. Thank you, Chair. My name's Tom Harris. I'm Executive Director of International Climate Science Coalition Canada. I have a bachelor and master's degree in mechanical engineering with a specialization in thermodynamics, heat transfer, and fluid mechanics. I worked as an engineer for the National Research Council, other government departments, and in the high-tech sector. As a lecturer at Carleton University, I taught climate change to about 1,500 students. To start, I'd like to tell you about what happened in Texas when they relied on unreliable power, as Ottawa plans. As dawn broke on February 15th, 2021, 80-year-old Julius Gonzalez made his way to one of his regular dialysis appointments. But he found the clinic had lost power and was closed. So he drove back to Arcola, Texas, where he lived with his wife, Mary. But the power was out there too. As temperatures plunged to -5, they couldn't get warm no matter how much and how close they huddled to their generator-powered electric heater. By 5 a.m. the next morning, Julius Gonzalez was dead. Mr. Gonzalez was one of about 700 people who died due to hypothermia, carbon monoxide poisoning, house fires, etc., caused by a power blackout that left over 8 million Texans without power, without heat and water for up to 5 days. With freezing temperatures, people resorted to using their gas ovens or burning furniture to stay warm. Others used barbecue grills or their cars to create heat. This created a carbon monoxide poisoning disaster. The blackout happened largely because the state did not have sufficient reliable power. As the state with the most wind power, Texas had become overly dependent on wind power, an unreliable source. You see, on February 8th, wind was providing over half of the state's electricity. But between February 8th and 16, wind crashed to just a few percent. The use of natural gas increased by more than fourfold, but it wasn't enough to make up the shortfall. If Ottawa goes ahead with its $57 billion plans to get rid of fossil fuels and power the city largely on wind and solar power, there's a huge risk that a greater disaster will hit Ottawa even than hit Texas. In our January 2022 report, ICSC Canada described why the city's climate change master plan is infeasible and damaging to Ottawans, the environment, and human rights. In July, we sent an open letter to Mayor Watson and the council, alerting them to our report, explaining that Ottawa is on the verge of a self-induced crisis being brought on by prioritizing, quote, stopping climate change, unquote, over real-world concerns. No one replied to either our letter or our report. Consequently, we ask that each member of this committee read our report at icsc-canada.com and respond in writing before voting on the budget. We also ask that you recommend to council that all funding for the city's climate change master plan, electric buses, and the resiliency and climate change program be removed from the budget until unbiased open consultations are carried out by this committee. Those consultations should involve experts from all sides of the issue so that councillors and the public can hear the actual state of climate science and the financial, safety, health, and security implications of Ottawa's net zero plans. To help the committee understand why we need fossil fuels to protect Ottawans and the environment, I will leave you with this report from the non-governmental International Panel on Climate Change, as well as some summary documents if you don't want to read 1,000 pages. To help you appreciate how the rise in carbon dioxide is actually good for the environment and good for humanity, I'll leave you this report with thousands of peer-reviewed studies that show the benefits of CO2 and how we actually have nothing to fear about increasing carbon dioxide. And indeed, I'll also give you this so you can read a summary as well. And finally, to give you an overview of the science that contradicts that which you're relying on, I'll leave you with this report, which actually talks about the science of climate change that is not actually covered by the media. And I'll also leave some summaries of that. We'd be pleased to meet with any of you personally and to present our findings to a committee or to the full council. We're convinced that following Ottawa's plans will leave us bankrupt, hungry, and freezing in the dark for no environmental benefit. I look forward to your comments and questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that. We generally try to avoid applause in these rooms, but I just wanted to say thank you for your presentation. There will, of course, be a lot of engagement opportunities with the resiliency plan. Of course, there was full consultation on the climate change master plan and, of course, on the solid waste master plan. So I look forward to the inputs that people will bring and appreciate you presenting today. Seeing one question from Councillor Curry.
I just wanted to thank you very much for coming and telling us this. I hear this a lot from people, particularly in Canada North, who will say, you know, we talk a lot about our green space and how important it is, But we also wonder if all the things that we're thinking we're going to do and go forward with are actually going to be the right thing. So I like that you've come here to show us that there are many opportunities for us to learn more before we do anything. But I do want to ask you, you know, one of the things we hear always is how important it is to have biodiversity. And is it your opinion when you look at energy evolution that that is not where we're going? Because in nature, biodiversity is key. In energy sourcing, it should be the same thing, so that we are not, as you say, solely reliant on one thing. So is that what you actually see in our document, that that's the messaging, that we should try to not be diverse in our energy sources?
Yeah, the biodiversity objective, of course, is really important. But I think it's important to understand also the environmental impact of wind and solar power. For example, at the Altamont Wind Farm in California, they kill 116 golden eagles every year and thousands of hawks and smaller animals. And it's interesting that a friend of mine he runs a bat sanctuary. And he says that in Ontario, we're driving some species of bats to total extinction, because unlike birds, bats only have to fly close to the turbine blade to die, because in the low pressure zone, their lungs burst and they drown in their own blood. So you end up with twice as many bats dying as birds. And so you know, and of course, they're putting these turbines in areas that have lots of wind. I mean, that's obvious. So these are fly zones north of the lake, for example, north of Lake Ontario. And the forecast is that we will, in fact, cause a great reduction in biodiversity because of the killing of birds, because of the killing of bats. And that's only one thing. If you look at solar, for example, they're putting up the largest solar plant near Las Vegas, and they're having to haul the desert tortoises out of their burrows and store them somewhere else while they build the wind farm or while they build the solar plant. And they estimate that half of all those desert tortoises will die. So, and similarly, if you look at the amount of land that's required for wind turbines and solar panels in comparison with a natural gas station, you're talking about literally hundreds of times more land. And a good thing to watch, actually, to understand the environmental impact of solar and wind, which, by the way, is probably the worst of any energy sources, is a film put out by Michael Moore called Planet of the Humans. Now, Michael Moore is hardly a right-winger, to say the least, but Michael Moore shows the true environmental impact when you count how you make the wind turbines, where you get the lithium, where you get the cobalt, where you get all the special and raw materials for wind and solar power. And he shows that you could argue that wind and solar power are the most damaging, environmentally damaging sources of power on the planet. The trouble is, when we talk about things like zero emission buses, we're not looking at how they're made. We're not looking at where the materials are come from. We're not looking at the environmental impacts of strip mining parts of South America and the lithium mines and things like that. And what you find, for example, in the case, even if you are concerned about greenhouse gases, and I don't think we should be, but even if you are, a friend of mine who's an automotive expert in California, his name's Ron Stein, he's shown that when you count how these EV batteries are made and how the cars are made, there is more greenhouse gases put out in an EV vehicle than the entire life of a normal gasoline-powered car. So you really need to do a full life cycle analysis. When you say things are zero emissions, it's simply not true.
All right, well, I would look forward to talking to you more for sure. And
Yeah.
I find it crazy that I didn't respond to your email, but if you want to resend.
Yeah, okay. Actually, I sent it to the previous council. Were you on the previous
I
council?
was, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't miss
okay.
any emails, it seems. But anyways,
I'll send it again.
send it. Thank
And
you.
I'll leave these on the table behind, okay? So it doesn't take up the space of the next person.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for that. Councilor Lula, if I saw your hand up, are you okay?
I did want to ask a question, Mr. Chair, but I'm not sure that it's best place here. Probably when we're dealing with solid waste master plan, I would ask that question if this individual wants to come back. I don't want to get it. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole when we're just talking about the terms of the budget.
Okay, fair enough. So can maybe do that offline or over email. Thanks, Councillor. Next up is Tegan Yaremchuk, Senior Program Specialist with the Ottawa Climate Action Fund. Tegan.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tegan Yaremchuk. I am the Senior Program Specialist for the Ottawa Climate Action Fund, which is incubated by the Ottawa Community Foundation. As this is one of OCAF's first times presenting to committee, I'd like to give you a bit of an intro to who we are. At OCAF, we work to accelerate Ottawa's transition to an equitable, carbon neutral future. We work with, support, and challenge all stakeholders to collaborate for more robust and faster climate action. We work to advance not just the business case for accelerating climate action, but the broader community and economic case. We also have an MOU with the City of Ottawa to support the transition needed to advance the energy evolution strategy. We're one of 7 LC3 centers across Canada, which is part of a Government of Canada investment in municipal climate action. Our priority areas are buildings, transportation, and 15-minute communities. And I'd love to give you some examples of our work to accelerate programs in those areas in Ottawa. So first that I want to tell you about is a electric vehicle car share pilot in partnership with Ottawa Community Housing. This brought an EV car share to communities that need it most and is accessible to 5 OCH communities, putting it within easy reach of 500 residents. On the building side, we have supported the Future Homes Ottawa program, which focuses on community engagement led by EnviroCentre that provides concierge services to encourage deep home retrofits, including a focus on some social housing. And finally, we recently launched a communications campaign in partnership with the City Climate Team to highlight meaningful and impactful actions residents can take to say goodbye to high-emitting tech and hello to low-carbon futures. You can keep an eye out for our billboards around city properties and bus shelters. But now onto the budget, which is what we're here to talk about. City budgets reflect our shared values and are a demonstration of our commitment to our priorities. It asks the question, are we putting our money where our mouth is, where our hearts and our minds are? We all know that Ottawa is and will continue to experience hotter, wetter, and wilder weather. Climate change is a threat multiplier, exacerbating physical, social, and economic risks. At OCAF, we applaud the much needed investment of $5 million per year to support the implementation of the city's climate change master plan. This investment will generate not only benefits for climate change, but economic, social, and other environmental benefits. We are also looking forward to seeing how the climate lens is applied into the future. We see this as an important down payment on the shift that is needed to effectively prevent and prepare for the worst impacts of climate change. While $5 million is significant, there is so much more that's needed as per the energy evolution strategy. We're also pleased to see significant investment in transit, especially the electrification of our bus system and active transportation. Improved transportation choices in walkable 15-minute communities are key to overall affordability in Ottawa as we work to meet official plan intensification goals and foster more missing middle housing. So I know today we're discussing this year's budget, but I do just want to provide some thoughts on why it's important to have significant investment for climate change and GHG reduction moving forward. So on our current trajectory in Canada, the climate crisis is set to cost Canadians $100 billion by 2050 and a potential loss of 500,000 jobs. Has already cost Canada $25 billion in the last 10 years. And as some fellow presenters have already stated, the derecho in May of 2020 cost the city $20 million in cleanup, and we quite literally cannot afford to deal with increased storms such as this one. We must fund mitigation and adaptation now. And as others have said, this doesn't include Hydro Ottawa cleanup costs of around $30 million or individual costs and insurance payouts. In addition to the cost of climate change, there are actual major benefits from taking action. Robust mitigation and adaptation measures in our communities can save 75% from these impacts, and every dollar spent on resilience and adaptation can save $15. I'm happy to provide references for these numbers as well, if that's helpful after the fact. But an even bigger number is $30 billion, which is the net potential savings from Ottawa's energy evolution strategy if fully implemented. So in closing, I just want to reiterate that OCAF supports and is excited by the $5 million per year funding towards Ottawa's climate change master plan. We look forward to further supporting the achievement of the city's energy evolution plans and to future municipal investments towards a vibrant, equitable, and carbon neutral future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tegan. And I think it would be appreciated by councillors if you could follow up with that that evidence you mentioned to all councillors on this committee. That'd be very helpful. I see Councillor King has a question. Mr. King.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations on your appointment. And thank you for your delegation. I was wondering, I know that you were talking about investments in electric vehicle chargers on OCH properties. I was wondering if you could talk to the efficacy of that program.
Yeah, so it's a relatively new program. So we don't have kind of all of our numbers. We just have one car share. So it's actually a physical vehicle that is on the OCH property, and it's accessible by 5 different properties. And we do plan to hopefully expand this program in the future.
No, thank you for that. Both electric vehicle charging and as well car sharing, obviously for OCH tenants is a very important prospect. And I really just thank you for looking into that potential. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor King. Thank you, Tegan, for your presentation. And next up is John Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and councillors, and good morning. My name's John D. Reid. I was previously Associate Director of Policy and International Affairs for the Meteorological Service of Canada, when it was a fight to get climate change even on the policy agenda. I hope this morning, I walked across the Corkstown Bridge and noticed there was no one on the Rideau Canal. There was no skating during Winterlude this year. I hope there is no debate about the reality of climate change at the moment. Now, with the addition of climate change to the name of this committee, will Ottawa move into the company of Toronto, Hamilton, St. Catharines, Windsor, and Montreal on the CDP list of 122 global cities leading on environmental transparency and performance on climate change? With Ottawa's proposed tax rate increase of less than half that of those other communities, I wish I could be more optimistic that climate change is being treated as an emergency. Briefly on the operating budget, although the item resiliency and climate change shows an increase from the 2022 budget, it's less than the 2021 actual and the 2022 forecast. Embedding $5 million in the capital budget for the climate change master plan, with $3 million for energy conservation in city facilities, is welcome, but more is needed. There are positive moves in other budgets, noticeably OC Transpo's acquisition of ZEBs. This year's first look at the city budget through a climate lens is a beginning, but the picture isn't clear. The lens is cloudy. If there were more than $3 million, city facilities would have the potential to become better, greener, faster. There's proven technology like highly efficient ground source heat pumps and solar panels we should see springing up on fire stations, community centers, and libraries. How about passive solar and insulation initiatives? Those have very favorable payback periods and would help develop the energy service industry in the city. Where are the additional shovel-ready projects that should be ready and waiting for funding? And I want to emphasize that I want those to be well-planned, not cobbled together at the last moment when funding opportunities arise. And what's the city's performance on GHG emission reduction? Present reporting arrives too late for it to have much impact. If I only had one ask within this budget, it would be to put in place a set of timely, that is monthly or quarterly, GHG emission KPIs, like total emissions from the fossil fuels used by the various city departments and agencies. Even though only a partial accounting Timely data, such as StatsCan releases for inflation and unemployment, they grab attention and prompt action. Just as the count of paramedic level zeros, OC transpo ridership, and affordable housing deficiencies have had during deliberations on this budget. My ask within the budget is for a consolidated fossil fuel emissions KPI for city operations on the same timescale as reports on city finances. That would be motivation for action appropriate to an emergency situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, John, and appreciate the intervention around the cost savings that Ottawa has had with a lot of these initiatives. Things like the LED changeover of our lights both save us money and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Same with the building retrofits that we've seen. We've seen savings that have come through those building retrofits with a 5 to 7 year payback. That's getting longer now as we do deeper retrofits, but there's significant financial savings for residents. It's the same on the operations side for our vehicles as we move to hybrid or lower emissions vehicles. We see those savings come back to us as well. So appreciate the presentation. And I see Councillor Curry has a question for you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. As you can tell, I like to hear the diversity of opinion on these things, as that's what we should be doing at this committee. So I guess my question to you is, what you're suggesting we do is spend a lot of money on processes that, as you say, they're not shovel ready, that could take many years to get going. And I think that to me doesn't sound like an emergency whatsoever. I mean, my environmental scientists in my life tell me that the number one thing we should be doing is looking at carbon capture and sequestration and dealing with the getting it out of the atmosphere and air right now, as opposed to slowly but surely reducing greenhouse gas emissions. What do you think of that?
I'm no expert on the technology of carbon capture and sequestration. I'm frankly concerned as to whether things that are put into the ground will stay there. I don't think that technology has proven yet. Certainly my understanding is that in Saskatchewan, a carbon capture project did not pan out. But I'm also concerned that the debate here is being tempered by fossil fuel interests that have a large investment in fossil fuels that are in the ground and want to exploit it. It's called stranded asset. And when you listen to people who advocate for fossil fuels, you realize that they use exactly the same kind of strategy that the people who argued against tobacco restriction used. So just be cautious about that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We're moving on to Jennifer Humphreys now with the Tree Caucus of Cafes. Jennifer, nice to see you.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, councillors. I'm here to speak for the Tree Caucus of Community Associations for Environmental Sustainability. I have only a little time, so I won't talk about why trees are important. It's pretty obvious now that trees are critical to slowing climate change and to mitigating its impacts. Councillors, you have lots to manage with this budget, and this committee has specific pressure due to Bill 23. This pressure is all the more reason to urge your fellow councillors to think green and to truly put a climate lens to bear on the 2023 budget. The Tree Caucus applauds the mayor's commitment to have the city plant 250,000 trees each year in the 4 years of council term. It's an appropriate target for our city, where the derecho of last May and the tornadoes of 2018 devastated our urban forest. It's an ambitious target, and it can be met, but only with the right level of funding. But when Tree Caucus members scan the city budget, what we see is a clear preference for gray over green, roads over green space and trees. It's not that there isn't funding for environmental programs, but there is massively more for roads. As was mentioned earlier by Angela Keller-Herzog, rather than, for example, widen the airport parkway, we urge this committee to urge council to defer this project and to divert its intended funds to planting and preserving urban trees and forests. Speaking of preservation, much more emphasis is placed on planting trees than on conserving them. Yet we know that the ecological services provided by 10 to 20-year-old trees are much greater than those from saplings. They are today's canopy. Saplings are future canopy, and we absolutely need both. Right now, we're witnessing the loss of over 500 mature trees from the new Ottawa Hospital site. That's why citizens are fighting so hard to save the Hunt Club Forest in River Ward, the Commons in Kitchissippi Ward, and why they fought so hard to save the Not Woods in Cumberland Ward. And the support of councillors and city staff in these cases is much appreciated. So please continue and reinforce these efforts to preserve what we have. Under the budget proposed, forestry receives a modest increase, but given their stretched resources, it's hardly enough to deliver on the planting program, let alone the responsibilities outlined in the Urban Forest Management Plan. Forestry needs resources to enforce Ottawa's tree protection bylaw, and they need resources to improve it. When the bylaw was enacted in 2021, the Tree Caucus flagged 2 gaps. These gaps impede the city's ability to attain the 40% tree canopy that we aspire to as development expands. The first gap regards suburban areas and rural villages. The bylaw provides for protection for trees on private property that are 30 centimeters diameter at breast height or greater in the inner urban area, but not outside the green belt. So we see a lot less protection for trees in the suburban areas and in the many villages that we have in the rural area. The second gap regards plantings on the city right-of-way on private property. When a tree must be removed, there's no automatic replacement. The landowner must apply to get a new tree. At a time of climate emergency, that's not good enough. The bylaw should be amended so that there's no net loss. When a tree is taken down, a new one is planted. To get to the target of 250,000 trees per year, this change is not only useful, it's necessary. These changes are critical, but they have a price tag, which isn't covered in the draft budget. The Tree Caucus urges this committee to take to council a plan that assigns more funds to forestry services, diverting funds from gray infrastructure as needed to achieve this. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Appreciate that. And just on the comment around the equalization of suburban and urban protection of trees, I know there was direction last term to come back in Q2 2023, I believe, of this term for a report on the diameter at base height for what would be considered a distinctive tree, to equalize what's been decided for the urban area at 30 centimeters versus the 50 centimeters that it is now suburban. So appreciate your intervention there, and we'll follow up on that one. Councillor Devine has a question for you.
Again, not so much a question, Jennifer, but just to thank you for your delegation. I know I had my team and I had a really, really good briefing with Allison Downs and Forestry, and I'm going to be following up with them, I think, when we get to questions, just to echo some of what you raised, because during the meeting I had, there was discussion, there is movement or strategy from Forestry with regards to some tree planting programs, whether it's the Trees and Trust program or others, where when trees are either removed from city property or when there is opportunity for tree planting on city property, easement land of residences, that it become more of a proactive, not necessarily mandatory, but more of a proactive approach rather than a responsive approach when just following residents' leads. And so I will be asking whether or not in their 2023 budget, if they believe that they have the resources in place to take that very, very proactive tree planting approach. So thank you for your question. I'll be going with that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate your work. And next up is Paul Johannes, with the chair of the Green Space Alliance of Canada.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. So I'm here today on behalf of the Green Space Alliance. Our concerns deal with protecting and preserving trees in particular, and wetlands in the current context are the two major focus that we have right now. in relation to this budget. So we're really looking at budget lines for the Natural Systems Group and the Forestry Group, which are the two organizations that are most concerned with these issues. And really what we see is really a status quo budget for both of those areas. Same number of full-time equivalents, small economic increases, except for maybe one thing, rural land acquisition. I'll come back to that after, but otherwise in terms of operating budget, it's pretty much status quo. And if we're just looking at the environment in which these groups are operating going forward, we're coming up on, we're into 5 years now of the Urban Forest Management Plan. We're in planning period 2 of that plan. We haven't really, I don't think, been able to keep pace with the progress that we wanted to keep pace under the Urban Forest Management Plan. And we're already into the next period. Also, the Urban Forest Management Plan, I expect, is supposed to be now rolled up, perhaps, with something called the Urban Forest and Green Space Management Plan, one of the new master plans under the new official plan. So this is new work. This is, work that's been well launched, but that requires funding and continued funding because it wasn't a funded plan when it was approved. It relies on the budget process annually to keep it on track. So that's kind of something that's happening in sort of in the background for these groups. Also, we have Bill 23, Bill 109. So we have accelerated development review process. We have changes in development applications that are subject to site plan. Only 10 units and more now have site plans. So we can expect, if this bill works the way it's supposed to, higher volumes, more applications, more development review, potentially more bylaw enforcement requirements. And yet we don't really see any budgets to respond to that. So there's a concern there. Are we going to be able to just keep fulfilling the plans we put in place and the tree protection plans and processes that we've established in the context of this status quo budget? One very specific question, I know that there was a very detailed review of all the processes internal to the city, because that was one of the real problems with the old bylaw, was just this lack of coordination, and that you've put in very good new provisions. One was a new position that was established as a liaison between natural systems and forestry to deal with this development review activity. I don't know that that wasn't funded on a permanent basis, and I'm wondering whether that's not covered in this current budget. It would be important to keep that kind of position, that kind of function going. As regards wetlands, we know that Bill 23 has really opened a whole new front in terms of risk for loss of wetlands. And there's nothing explicit in the budget dealing with wetlands and preservation and protection of wetlands in this new context. So this is another area where there's been change in the environment. There's new risks that are there, and have we done anything has the city done anything in this budget to deal with this new eventuality? There is, and I've seen there is a $725,000 rural land acquisition provision in the capital budget and for natural systems. And so I don't know what that's earmarked for, what's tagged for, but if it was aligned with the new risks facing the city regarding the loss of wetlands, that would be a good move. Anyway, so those kind of detailed budget line considerations that we have, but there's concerns that we need to be able to maintain the capacity that we've built in the city to do the development review and the tree protection and bylaw enforcement going forward in the new year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. I'll just see if there's any quick questions anyone has. Okay, so seeing none, just want to thank you for your delegation and good to see you again. Next up is Raymond Lurie, with President of the Electric Vehicle Council of Ottawa. Raymond, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Chair, and congratulations also on being named Chair for this term of council. So a number of things have come up, and one of the things I want to reflect on, given what was said earlier in one of the delegations, is you need to follow the money. So when a delegation is talking to you about what council should be doing and what this committee should be doing, you really need to follow the money. If someone is telling you that they don't think that we should be concerned about greenhouse gases, unfortunately, the science tells us that we need to be concerned about greenhouse gases and we need to move fast. Just a few stats to counteract some of those stats. Domestic cats in North America kill over 1 billion birds a year in North America alone. Over 1 billion, many more, many orders of magnitude more than windmills. And also, if you were to replace the oil industry with the with equivalent solar industry, it would take 1/3 of the land area that the oil and gas industry uses in North America. So it's very easy to twist arguments to make your industry or your backers look good. So last term of council, there was lots of studying of the problem. So we have the Energy Evolution Plan, and we have a number of other things, the Climate Change Master Plan, etc. But there hasn't been very much action on resolving the problems, right? So one of the exceptions is the eBus project, which has been a tough slog. So we've been at EFCO, we've been working on that file for 4 years now. Okay, it's been 4 years, and we still have only 4 e-buses on the roads, and it's going to be another year or so before we get the next batch of 26 on the road. So still, progress is we're making progress, but progress is quite slow, and we need to accelerate that. So meanwhile, you probably have heard that the city of Moscow, which, yes, the one in Russia, has 1,000 e-buses on its roads, right? So, and that's a capital city of a country that you will agree that is much more dependent on oil and much more of a proponent of using oil, and yet they have 1,000 electric buses on their streets. So this term of council, I'm hoping that we could focus on actions that will reduce greenhouse gases, not just from corporate emissions, but also from emissions from the community, as some others have mentioned. So we have a climate crisis, and we need to hit the accelerator. We have a climate crisis. Council declared a climate crisis a couple of years ago, and we're still really going very slow. So, I'm happy to see some progress. The $5 million for climate change is progress. It's not entirely all new money, but a good chunk of it is good money. So it is very good to see that. The energy management strategy is also a good thing to see. But again, that's a study of what we could be doing. We really need to move ahead. And as Chair, you've mentioned many of the energy saving projects that have already been implemented by the city and need to be implemented will save money for the city, and the same with energy saving projects for the community in general. So we really need to accelerate that for us to meet our targets. The DER framework, so Distributed Energy Resources Framework, is also a very good thing. There's lots of potential in Ottawa to generate power within the territory of the city. Things like in France, actually, they have just essentially mandated that every parking space or every parking that's over 80 spots be covered with canopies, solar canopies, and that alone will result in an 8% increase in the capacity, electric production capacity in France, the equivalent of 10 nuclear reactors. So there are solutions there, and the DERs are a big part of that. Happy to see the Climate and Change Resiliency team is there. I would like to see an increase in the budget there. As one speaker has said before, the team itself is static. There isn't any increase there. The Energy Evolution Program is great. It does cover what it covers very well, and it provides really good guidance. However, it doesn't cover some things that are important source of emission for Ottawa. So in particular, cement production and steel production emits about 15% of global greenhouse gases, and we don't take that into consideration. So if we don't take it into consideration, if we don't measure it, we're not likely to try to reduce the quantities there. So I would encourage the city to start looking at those other sources of greenhouse gases that we could control, because there is some flexibility in our plans to reduce the amount of concrete and steel that we use for capital projects. So
Okay.
that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right on time. There are 5 minutes. So we have a couple of questions. Councillor Hill.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Leary, I'm a bit concerned when I hear about scientific technology and reports coming out of Russia. I don't want to put you on the spot either, but if you have the source for that technical information, I'd be interested to get that. And if you don't have it at your hand, I wouldn't mind an email that just follows up that report that talks about the electric bus program in Moscow. Thank you very much.
Okay, sure. I'll get that to you.
Okay, Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Raymond. You know, I drive an electric car. I've had your group come to the Canada Center, there and have people be able to try out the cars. But I often get that question about overall, to the earlier presentation. Overall, though, electric cars have batteries that have to be manufactured in plants that strip mining problems occur from, all those things. Overall, is there research that show overall this is better for the environment? I feel like we have this conversation sometimes that, oh, clearly they're better. But overall, are there reports or evidence that shows that from start to finish, getting electric vehicles, including our buses, is actually better for the environment?
So yes, there are studies that show that. The studies that the studies that are independent show that it takes about 10,000 kilometers to recoup the difference in greenhouse gases in the manufacture of an electric car versus a gas vehicle. Now, the amount of greenhouse gases in the manufacture of a vehicle will very much depend on who the manufacturer is. So if you look at some examples, the Chevy Bolt that's produced in Ohio, where they use a lot of coal for electricity, is likely to have a higher carbon footprint than a Tesla vehicle that's produced in a plant that's using renewable energy and trying to reduce the overall footprint, right? So it really depends on the vehicle, but yes, every manufactured product has an environmental footprint. Every product has a carbon footprint of some sort. But again, there is a difference. Generally speaking, apples to apples, electric car will result in more carbon emissions. But again, it doesn't take very long. We're talking about 6 months of driving to make up the difference.
Thank you for that.
Okay, you're welcome.
Hey, thank you. And actually, Councillor Kavanaugh has a question for you as well.
Thank you, Raymond. In terms of plugging in your vehicles, one thing I hear from people for why they're discouraged to get an electric vehicle is places where they can plug in, and it's a budget question in terms of should we be doing more as a city to encourage that, both in new buildings or our own lots. Is it enough?
That's a very good question. Very pertinent. So the high performance development standard actually has some stuff in there that will help with new developments, right? Where some new developments will be compelled to provide some charging infrastructure for all the parking spaces that are provided. Now, that being said, there's a lot of already built infrastructure or housing stock that needs to be addressed. And what I'm finding, I've talked to many condo boards in particular about deploying some charging infrastructure. And the big issue for condo boards is getting the ball rolling and getting those first few stations deployed, because sometimes there's a significant capital investment that's required to do the initial steps, right? So, and most condo corporations, you're talking about, say there's 100 units, there may be just 1 or 2 electric cars. So short term, we don't need that many chargers, but longer term, we know we're going to need a lot more, right? So, so it's a significant issue, and it'd be great if the city would help in various ways. So, whether it's providing some capital funding or providing some programs that would match the ZVIP program from the federal government, or providing resources to help condos and also MERBs rentals understand how to proceed. That would certainly help accelerate that. One of the concerns we have at EFCO is that given that electric vehicles are much less expensive to operate, there are a good solution. You know, as we see more and more used EVs on the market, they're a good solution for people who have to drive but don't have a big budget, right? So, and we're concerned that those people will, if they don't have access to charging at home, it'll be difficult for them to take advantage of the operational savings. So we'd like the city to play a role in helping the disadvantaged communities have access to charging.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you for that, Raymond. And we're going to be moving on now to questions for staff from committee members on the tax-supported and rate-supported budgets. If there are questions or comments, now is the time to get them in. Obviously, we had a big presentation with lots of staff here to answer questions. So we will start with Councillor Hill.
Thank you. I was just hoping, perhaps it's for you, Mr. Rogers, if I could get a more detailed breakdown of what that $5 million that's going to be invested is going to go into for the 23 budget year.
Through the chair, actually, Mr. Weiss, I think that's a more question for him. He'll take you through where that money will be allocated.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, could you please repeat the question?
Sure, and actually I had anticipated this too, and I asked the same question earlier as well. So it's what is the $5 million being allocated to? It's being proposed in the budget. Just some more specifics on where that funding will go.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to turn this over to Andrea Flowers, who is our manager of climate change, and she can just provide a brief high-level overview of where that $5 million will go.
Thank you, Chair. The $5 million will be allocated to a mix of projects that both support energy evolution and the climate resiliency strategy. In terms of specifics, the $5 million will include a range of projects for municipal building retrofits, residential retrofits, commercial building retrofits, and the programs that support those, as well as a range of studies related to community heating strategies, district energy, renewable natural gas, and communications and consultation support for climate change education and outreach.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. One follow-up to that, if I can. With the structure of your team and with that new injection of funds into your organization, you have the resources to manage those programs, or is there an addition in terms of like HR component or additional staff that goes with that?
Some of those funds may be used to employ temporary staff. Certainly with an increase in budget, we have additional funding to use, and we require additional staff capacity to deliver on or develop those programs.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hill. Councillor Kavanaugh.
For working on this budget, being it's our first one that is focusing on with the climate change lens. I really appreciate that. I want to know, is it possible to show data, and maybe it can't be done in this budget, but in future budgets, to show the savings that we have when we reduce greenhouse gases, or if we have some kind of calculation to show it. That was mentioned by Mr. Reid about, just calculating greenhouse gas emission reductions. Is that something that we can do in the future that could be part of the budget to show the difference?
Through the chair, I think it is. I don't want to commit to how good we'll get there, but I think that's definitely a takeaway for myself and probably collaboration with David and Andrea's team. I think there's a way that we can start in integrating some of those key KPIs into the budget. So I'll take that away and definitely be part of the process as we enhance the 2024 budget.
Thank you. I think that's what we really want to see. We want to see our efforts working, and I think it's important to feel good. I understand that Edmonton is already doing this, so we do have examples out there. So thank you. I did have a specific question on flood mapping, because this is the time of year we start thinking about it, certainly around in my neighborhood. And I just wanted to know how that's going to work. And because my concern is that the conservation authorities have had cuts in their budgets, and is the city backing, basically kind of backfilling the money needed for conservation authorities to do this work? Or I just hope that it can be done properly, because I have concerns when conservation authorities are so, not respected in terms of the provincial budget. And yet we know how valuable they are to our municipality. So is there enough funding for them to get this work done?
We do coordinate our efforts with the conservation authorities with covering the drainage basins within the city of Ottawa, and we feel that this funding allocation will meet our needs for 2023. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I also appreciate the some of the questions we had on the solid waste. One of the questions was about what other municipalities are doing and user pay, and I hope that we will consider that, because that's very much a budget question, where we have to make sure that people understand that valuable our garbage is, and that and the importance of recycling, etc. I guess that can be modeled for future budgets on how much that would bring in and reduce our overall rates of garbage, which of course would mean a savings. Is that something we're looking at?
Sorry, Chair, I'm not sure if I got the question there.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm talking about when we put user fees on, and we haven't got that in this budget. Are we looking at modeling for how much that would reduce the amount of garbage, which of course would be a saving, plus we would have user fees?
Hi, Chair. So I think the question is related to our curbside diversion options. So basically, we will be coming back to this committee later this year to present recommendations. And part of that work does consider what other municipalities do in order to bring our fulsome recommendations to this committee later this year.
Okay, thank you. And I understand it was mentioned that Markham has some good examples. So, okay, I'll leave it to my colleagues. I'm sure there's lots of good questions coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd just like to really thank staff for the commitments of $5 million into ensuring that we really kickstart our investments around climate change. Also, very pleased in terms of the capital budget that we're making the requisite investments to ensure the continued wonderful quality of drinking water and infrastructure to deliver that. So very thankful on those elements. In terms of the operating budget, I did have a few questions. We did note an increase of $655,000 for forestry services. And underneath that, there were costs of about $4.6 million for the derecho storm that hit us last year. Our understanding from the budget was that some of those costs were partially offset by deferred and canceled activities. I've asked this question at, I believe, Emergency Protective Services around whether there is the need for a reserve for severe weather responses. We know that they're going to continue and we're going to have continued challenges. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to how do we budget for these types of contingencies?
Through the chair, you're correct. We don't have a specific reserve just for natural disasters, weather events, et cetera. What we do have is the tax stabilization reserves. That reserve is kind of for all tax supported operating, where we leverage that reserve for those types of events. So in the case of 2022, I'll be back to FinCorp early April with a report on the final results of 2022. And if there's any impact for that reserve to fund those impacts from the ratio for forestry, public works, et cetera, I'll report that through there.
I appreciate that. And in the context of the environment and climate change portfolio, I'm looking forward to that report as well. I just have two other questions concerning increases to the $5.15 million solid waste services budget. I know there was an increase for $3.4 million for garbage collection. Is this due to new contractor agreements?
Through the chair, so yes, so through the procurement process in 2019, as well as the extensions that happened in 2021, we negotiated pricing for continued services in 2023 and beyond. And so that increase reflects those price increases.
I appreciate that clarification. And there is a item that is listed for $2.38 million for solid waste non-departmental. I was just wondering what that element entails.
So I'll start. So Chair, that is for contributions towards the solid waste reserve.
Yeah. So just to elaborate that, so solid waste, much like the rate program itself, solid waste does contribute into its own reserve. So we do have a solid waste reserve. So that's a contribution to fund the capital program.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. And just one last question. I think in this budget, we reported hydro savings of $400,000 due to operational efficiencies in drinking water services, but those efficiencies were unspecified. I was just curious if you could provide some insight into how those savings were achieved.
Through the chair. So these are mainly your hydro utility bill, just from the efficiency perspective and some of the investments we made over the years in ROPEC, et cetera, just kind of, new technologies, new investments, improving the use. So really it's a savings from that perspective.
And that's excellent. That's what we want from these new technologies, the efficiencies and savings. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Councillor King. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, staff, for being here and for your presentation. And also thank you to the delegates who presented here today. Oftentimes what you bring and the information you bring, it doesn't only help inform my question, but it often helps motivate the questions. And the two questions I had today are kind of based on what I heard from delegates. So I was really happy to review when I started seeing the project budget reports that through the climate lens, the projects are now viewed with the question, does it reduce greenhouse gases? No, yes, minor contribution, yes, major contribution. Does it build climate resiliency? And the answers are either no or yes, minor, yes, major. And so the question we had from Angela Keller-Herzog, interesting question at the beginning of the delegation, was, is there consideration whether now or for future implications that these reports, because oftentimes if there's a no answer, that doesn't always mean that there's a neutral, it could mean that there's a negative implication. So there is no categorization now for this project will have negative implications either on GHG or on climate resiliency. I know that as a councillor, weighing in on these projects, I zero in on that, and I would certainly zero in, just like when I look at infrastructure reports for that red arrow telling me there's a problem. Is there a consideration for future implications that these project reports might, on the assumption that some projects would have a negative implication on GHG or a negative implication on climate resiliency, that it could be indicated in these project reports? Is that a possible consideration for future reporting?
Through the chair, if you indulge me for a couple minutes, because I really want to highlight the amount of effort that went into the budget to get us where we got to. The finance team, David Weiss, Andrea's team, and all the clients put a lot of effort to get it there. And I'll be honest, they kind of got it farther than I thought they were going to get it in the first go around, if you will. So we are planning to enhance that. This was our commitment to kind of, we got to do something. And I think we did some great work there. And now we're going to evolve that, and we'll evolve that through, the feedback we get here, feedback that we get through the variety of consultations. So I think that's important, that we will continue to grow this and kind of improve it, enhance it, maybe layer onto it, but we're definitely there to explore different improvements going forward.
Yeah, and by no means at all, am I like, why don't we have this now? I think it's just a lovely direction possibly to go for in the future. And I do recognize that kind of additional information would be more, resources and time. And it's thanks to the resources and time that we have this information here, which is very, very valuable. My next question, without at all being disrespectful, is probably piling on more kind of work kind of thing. So there was an interesting question from one of the delegates, John Reed, about the reporting that we have on GHG emissions and on the safe assumption that, GHG emissions are something that the city wants to aim towards reducing as a whole. And this question had been about, what would be the requirements involved for, increasing the frequency of the reporting we have, which, as I understand now, I believe it's to be annual reporting on GHG emissions through city operations or fleet vehicle or so forth. So could I just ask from staff, is there any kind of plan, and again, not for now, but in the future, about moving towards an increase in the frequency of those reports? I understand we get quarterly reports on some other indicators, but would there be advantageous and would there be any kind of plan moving forward for an increase in the frequency of that kind of reporting?
Through the chair, I'm not sure if someone else wants to top me up, but I see it as evolving. The nature of our operations is there's a lot of variables, and I don't want to discount that, but if you look at winter operations, there's more plows on the roads in January, February. There's no plows, hopefully, in June, July, and August. So just the nature of the volatility of our operations, I think an annual is a good starting point. I think as we evolve our systems and our reporting, tools internally and improve that technology, I think, we look at that lens every time we try and make an enhancement to our, reporting tools, our SAP system. So that will help us, give us more flexibility in terms of frequency. But I think, either annually or semi-annually is probably where we start, and then we kind of grow it from there.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Devine. Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm hoping someone can answer questions about the rural area acquisitions. I don't know who is there today from staff chair that can perhaps answer a couple questions about that. So on page 32 of the draft capital budget, where this project or this program is listed out, I'm interested to understand, I guess, the financing piece specifically. This year, the request from staff is for $25,000 to come from the tax-supported dedicated stream. However, we're going to borrow $700,000 against debt, with $4.5 million sitting in an account for this project or program. So can someone explain to me why, if we have unspent funds, we would go and borrow money to build up that account now?
So through the chair, I'll speak to the financial side, and I'll let other staff kind of speak to the use of the money and the unspent works in progress. So basically, when we look at our overall tax supported debt, we try and leverage it to assets that have a longer life. So we prefer to put debt on a 30-year asset or a 40-year asset versus a 10 or 15-year asset, because it's just more financially viable to do that. So that's kind of why there's debt on that. It doesn't mean that, if I took that debt off there and moved it to a roads project typically has 20 years. So I look at the overall debt of the overall tax, not by project exclusively, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
And I'll defer to staff in terms of the acquisition.
Sure. I'm not sure if this helps out, but basically we use that rural natural area funding to support our ongoing acquisitions of rural properties as opportunities arise. So and work towards sort of the stewardship and management of those lands once they come under city ownership. So if you'd like more information on how we do that, my colleague Nick Stowe, who isn't available today, we can meet with you sort of offline and talk more about that if you'd like. Thanks.
No, I'd appreciate that, but perhaps generally, can you tell me what kind of lands we're purchasing with these funds?
Well, it's natural areas usually, so it could be significant wetlands, it could be things that we would consider as sort of significant woodlands, it could be areas, ANTC areas of natural and scientific interest, things like that. So we've done mapping exercises on how to, basically corridor mapping so that we have, connected areas, natural areas across the landscape in our rural area. And those would be the kind of lands that we'd be looking at, first and foremost, but it really is an opportunistic thing at this point. But we can definitely get into more detail with you when we talk with Nick as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Brown. Councillor Curry.
Thank you. I have 4 questions, I think. First one is, so what I understand in this budget is there's really only an increase of 2.66 FTE. First of all, do I have that right? That's what I see at the bottom of one of these category headings for this committee is a total increase in FTE is 2.66.
No, I believe, I don't know off the top of my head, but I think there's 6 in your rate budget, I believe, Tammy. So there's more than 2 because it's definitely 6 on the rate side that I can speak to, but yeah.
Okay, maybe I'm missing a chart. I was cutting and pasting various ones, but anyways, okay, that's fine. My question is, last year's Environment Committee, I think we had 10, if not more, presentations on groups that wanted to get out there and pull out dog strangling vine and noxious weeds. If you will recall, we don't seem to have that group here this year, but we did talk a little bit about having more of a coordinated way of going about, using people really to do some of the work we could get done. And my understanding is we would need a coordinator position at the city to do that. Is there any thought about that, not in this budget, or how we would do it? I think Andrea was saying that temporary staff, there's also that worked into this budget. Is there any conversations, are there any conversations around that for groups that could do some of the work we would like to get done?
Through the chair. So I would say yes. I mean, at the end of the day, if the departments want to entertain that resource, that's where they come to my team and we can establish that temporary funding in year if we identify a source. I think that's the work that we need to do collectively as a team to see, okay, how do we find that right resource for that coordination? So I think we need to coordinate ourselves to find that coordinator to do that work.
I'd like to start that conversation more seriously, I guess. I mean, now we're right at this budget, but I would like to look at how we could possibly do that because I know there's so many groups that would just like to have someone coordinate them and then they could be safely doing things that we maybe aren't getting to or don't have staff to do. Okay, I'll follow up with that one later on. My next question is, the savings that we saw at ROPEC, another budget, if not this meeting, was about streetlights, how much money we'd saved in changing all the bulbs. All of that has under the category heading of Hydro Ottawa. And I know Hydro Ottawa has many other ideas, including billing and how they could work with us in terms of changing our billing structure because they have billing and communications. But what do we see an easy way for Hydro Ottawa to come in and talk to us? Because the mayor just talking about an innovation technology table. We have this working group on programs and services, line by line budget review. Do we see an opportunity that Hydro Ottawa could come in and talk to us about all the ideas they may have?
Through the chair, I would say yes. I mean, it's kind of a high question. I mean, I think there's always opportunity for our partners, specifically Hydro, to come in and talk to us and explore opportunities.
Okay, well, I would like others' ideas on that, how that might work, because, I think about putting forward a motion saying that Hydro Ottawa needs to be involved at every level, wherever there is a climate change resiliency conversation or energy savings conversation or efficiencies, whatever it looks like. We have motions come forward sort of all over the place, but not really a coordinated way as to how we could always be including Hydro Ottawa. So I just wanted to make that point that might be coming. The delegation that asked us to go to universities to talk to students, is there, I know, Cyril, you're out there every night. So many of you are out there every night talking to groups. Is that something that is happening or can happen or happens in a different way that we're not aware
of? Through the chair, I mean, I'm not aware of it from a finance perspective because I haven't went out to a university. So I suspect if I signed up for that, I would be the guy doing that. Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea, right? I think there's an opportunity there. I think as we go through the next, like setting ourselves up for 2024 budget and looking to counselors for input on consultation, that could be an interesting way of doing a different consultation as opposed to doing it specifically in your ward. I know lots of counselors come together for a consolidated ward. You know, maybe we do it at a university as an idea. I certainly be open to that kind of thought or idea.
Okay, great. That would be wonderful. And the last question I have is also from a delegation on the multi-res green bin. One of the delegations talked about if we had extra money, that maybe that might be a top priority. How far are we down the road of that actually happening? I remember at planning, we talked about this. We talked about it at a number of committees last year. But in terms of this budget, is there movement in this budget to make that happen faster?
So, Chair, I'll speak to the finance money that is on the table potentially that the delegate referenced. I mean, that money will be reinvested in the solid waste. We know that there's a solid waste master plan coming and there's some additional reports coming. So I'll kind of lob it over to Shelley.
Chair, yes, there are some line items within the budget that speak specifically to the multi-res strategy. So there's about 550,000 identified in order to support the onboarding, and in addition, some additional communication tactics in order to help facilitate the uptake within those multi-res properties. So later this year, we will be coming back to this committee in order to share the implementation plan. As mentioned, right now, currently new builds are required to have a green bin program, but there are a lot of stock that do not have green bins at this point. So we are coming back with a strategy in order to implement or onboarding the remaining properties. So in addition to physically getting them the green bins, it's also looking at some of the communication tactics in order for residents to start using those green bins.
Okay, super. I'll look for that report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curry. And just on the universities side of things, I know Councillor Plant, myself, and others certainly have been engaging with students throughout the time. Our email list goes out to Carleton University administration and students there as well on any budget consultations. I think it's a great idea that I'll have it at a campus kind of separately and maybe focus it on what the student investments would be, things that are going to benefit them, like bus service, whatever else they might be using more than your average Ottawan. So I like that idea a lot. Thank you. Councillor Carr.
Thank you very much. And just want to reassure Councillor Curry that there are in fact people that were there last year, invasive plant species advocate that are here this year, just in a slightly different position. So that is one of my questions was there had been advocacy last year for that stewardship position, and I'm obviously very interested in finding out what happened with that and how we can better manage the removal of invasive plants in our park spaces. There still is a big lag in terms of the consent to enter agreements. And so now my broader question is, that was a commitment, I believe, in the urban forestry management plan. And I just wondered how this budget is addressing the urban forest management plan, because my understanding is it was divided into two management years, the first being 2017 to 2022, and now 2022 to 2025. And certainly, as Councillor King mentioned, with the derecho and the impacts of the trees, we're probably behind on quite a lot of commitments. And I was just wondering if someone can respond to whether or not the budget as allocated will be, in fact, responding to all the recommendations in the urban forestry management plan to date.
Thank you for the question through you, Chair. Can you hear me? I'm in a very awkward position here. Okay, so yes, so we actually made an adjustment to our management periods, and because we wanted to align them with terms of council. So now we've aligned them with terms. We sort of added an extra year to our first management period. And now the second management period goes from this year until for 4 years. So it's aligned with the term of council. Staff is going to be coming back to this committee in a few months with our sort of update on the urban forest management plan. And basically, we're going to be talking about what we accomplished in the first management period, outlining some of the challenges and opportunities that we had, challenges being a keyword, and what our work plan is for the second management period. So we did face challenges for sure due to the pandemic, several large weather events, and contending with a very large work plan that we had laid out for ourselves with the urban forest management plan, but we did accomplish a lot of good work. For the second management period, the UFMP report that we'll come back with is going to provide a discussion around resources required for implementation, and then we'll move forward from there. So that would be sort of, that report is still to come, and those resources would be a future pressure beyond this year.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. Councillor, I guess we'll come back to you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to follow up on one of the questions that was raised by one of my colleagues, and it's with regard to the public space that we're going to be installing personal electric vehicle chargers. I think the number I heard was something in the 20s for 2023. I just wanted to confirm how many electric charging stations are we looking to install in public spaces in 2023? And is that a part of a program that's looking to continue those installations year over year?
Through you, Chair. We have some work to do before we install a significant number of charging stations. We currently have an outdated corporate EV policy, and we have not yet developed a personal EV strategy. So over the next several months, staff will be working across the corporation to develop that personal EV strategy, including prioritizing where installations should happen and what the fees should be for that charging infrastructure, what some of the asset considerations over the long term will be for that, and how to address some of the significant equity considerations we think there are in the installation of EV infrastructure. We'll also be updating our corporate EV policy to align with identifying where EV chargers should be placed on city property or in city right-of-ways, and looking to establish the fee structures that support that and the business processes with that. Now, even if the city is not advancing quickly on their own installations in 2023, we are working closely with Hydro Ottawa, who is seeking additional federal funding and is substantially increasing the number of EV chargers in the private space over the next year through funds through NRCan.
Oh, thank you very much for that. That's good clarification, because I am under the impression that there are some concerns about the rollout of that program. So I appreciate to hear that that there's a due consideration going into that process. A concern that I have is also linked with the engagement that we have with Hydro Ottawa on this topic in terms of broader rollout of this program and the capacity that the City of Ottawa has as we look forward towards electrifying the personal vehicles in the city, and what that means in terms of our grid capacity and what we can actually do, and how that relates to further capital investments. So I'm not sure if that's direction, but I'm interested in having that discussion over the next several months to see how that kind of capital investment piece goes. Thank you, Chair.
Just on Councillor Hill's question there, it sounds like that is coming back just as a potential direct. Do you need direction on that, or is that going to be part of what you're bringing back?
I believe that will be covered through the direction we've already received and through the comments we've heard from other councillors in the past. Okay. We're targeting Q3 for that.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Hill. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. I guess a continuation of a question back to Forestry Services, and thank you to my colleague, Councillor Carr, for leading with that question. And the answer that you gave certainly had a lot of foreshadowing for the next budget year. But just to reaffirm my similar concern that your department is properly resourced for what I imagine will be the second, third, and fourth year of your next term phase. However, that means that this 2023 year is the implementation of the larger plan to come, just at the very least if this year is a planning year, are you properly resourced for that planning, and will it be effective enough that there will be the stage will be set for 2024?
Absolutely. This is kind of a planning year, and that we're going to be bringing forward that report that I discussed, through your chair, that I discussed. Also looking at sort of our sort of big feature project of the next management period, which will be focused around tree planting and what you discussed earlier around reframing how we deliver our tree planting program, sort of that how to get to 40% canopy cover over the long term. So looking from moving our tree planting programs from a more sort of reactive type of approach to a proactive approach, also looking at our canopy cover data and where the holes are, we want to get trees where trees are needed the most. And considering how we're going to approach that, we want to take an equity approach to that. And because our commitment under the official plan is to have 40% equitably across the urban area. And so basically this year will be the UFMP report and planning for that tree planting strategy. And like I said, we're going to be able to identify where some of the pressures are in the UFMP report and move forward with that. I'll say one more thing on the tree planting strategy is that we plan to do it in stages so that it isn't going to be something that takes 5 years and then we say, here's all the changes. We'd like to do it in pieces so that we can make those changes quicker as we go through them. So as we plan that out, we'll be coming back with each sort of solution to move those things forward, which may have pressures associated with them as well.
Thank you. And just a quick little follow-up. If with the understanding that the success of a lot of your tree planting programs is the relationship between forestry and residents, for example, with the Trees and Trust program, I'm sure there are other similar programs that involve participation with residents. Does your 2023 implementation year include any kind of investment for outreach and education of residents?
We will do outreach with respect to the Trees and Trust program. Certainly when we're stamping in front of homes as a result of the direct show, we will be leaving communication pamphlets for the residents to call to have a tree planted. We do need their participation in terms of watering and caring for the tree, which is why we just maybe don't automatically plant at this point. I will also say, though, along with our regular tree planting programs that we are implementing this year, we're going to be planting approximately 7,500 extra trees to address the Derecho damage. And in addition to that, you may have heard that we were recently approved for the 2 billion tree program. And so we'll be also planting 10,000 additional trees with respect to that in
Sure.
collaboration with the feds.
Chair, if I can just add just a bit more information as well, just with respect to the rollout of the first phase of the urban forestry management plan within the processes that we have. We are looking at coming forward with an identification of whether any resources further are needed for continuing work with the development industry for integrating tree processes within both development services as well as the Committee of Adjustment to manage some of those urban infill forestry pressures as they go forward. That would be a report that would be coming forward with respect to Bill 109 and Bill 23 pressures later in this term.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Devine and Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to know if there's any way that we can look at active transportation in terms of the environment portfolio. We had talks about a road being widened, etc. But what is it that we can do that could be under the environment envelope in terms of cycle infrastructure, for example, to show that we're working towards getting people out of cars? That's probably the biggest thing going, is that we're trying to get people out of cars, maybe into electric cars for sure, but just trying to get people switched over to walking and cycling more. How is it possible to do that? And there's any examples out there so that we can work towards that. And that's why I was interested in the idea of working with the Transportation Committee, because I think that's something that we need to look at.
Sure, I can maybe respond a bit just in terms of just the, and Councillor Kavanaugh's quite right in terms of the cross-cutting and integrated nature of all of this in terms of how we move forward. Of course, the prospect that we're looking at is not to force or require, but to provide opportunity. And that is also part of the work that we are continuing to do with our colleagues in transportation planning with respect to the local cross sections, the work we've done on the collectors. So as new work is done, we look at opportunities to integrate trees, cycle paths, additional walk surfaces, multi-use paths into those cross sections, into those projects as they go forward. As well as we move along, we're also working along with our colleagues to understand of course, where those future potential transit routes might go. So as we look for the new subdivisions that we're developing, we look to make sure that there is a transit network, an opportunity for transit networks that are built into those subdivisions, along with the active transportation methodologies. So yes, I think that is a cross-cutting issue that is continually being rolled out, and that is something that that staff are in very close discussion with as we go forward.
Yeah, thank you. But I'm also thinking in established areas, and I appreciate that the newer areas are, you sort of got a clean slate, but we have to integrate them into communities that exist right now, such as inner urban and outer urban communities across the city. So I'm hoping that we're going to look at the benefits of that, and that when we do our, for example, when we do our repaving of roads, can it be something that's automatic, that we look at how can we do cycle infrastructure, et cetera, every time we do these things. I'm not seeing that as an automatic. So I think that's important. I was just told that Edmonton is encouraging things like having a rebate for e-bike purchases. So there's things out there that we can do. And I just wanted to know how is that possible to look at ways of putting in the cycle infrastructure into our environment budget.
Yeah. So Councillor Kavanaugh, I'll just jump in, and obviously we have the chair of our transportation committee on our environment committee, which is very helpful to have Councillor Tierney here in our environment terms of reference under number 5 under environment. We've got review and make recommendations to council and other standing committees where applicable on initiatives to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve air quality, such as building retrofits, energy management, renewable energy, electric vehicles, and sustainable modes of transportation. So it's right there in our terms of reference. This committee can make recommendations to council or other standing committees if they're impacting climate, environment, and certainly that's something we can do in the future. So if we're looking at items that may affect sustainable transportation, it's right there in our terms of reference that we approved today. And I hope that we do make some of those recommendations, just given the overlap of committee work. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I do hope to see more of those items in the future. Councillor Vice Chair Carr.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if the question is really in order for budget, but I'll ask it and let you tell me. In the budget documents, the fixed charges for water user fees continue to increase. And I'm just wondering, this is the Environment Committee that we discussed this in. There seems to be very little incentive for water reuse for homeowners, when the fixed charges seem to almost penalize those that use the least water the most, if that makes sense. And I'm wondering if there's been any thought. I've got lots of people in my community who are trying to reuse water through rain barrels and other methods, but frustrated by the fact that the fixed charges are so high. And I just wondered if there'd been any thought on how that could help achieve more environmental objectives and be tied to that.
Through the chair. So a good component of the charges is variable, which that's your incentive to limit your use. The challenge with the fixed side is maybe it's not a challenge, not the right word, but the infrastructure component rate is so capital intensive that the fixed charges are relatively high. And that's why we need to have that, recovery on the fixed side. But I don't have the exact ratio of fixed versus variable, but I think there's a larger component that's variable, which is the incentive to be more responsible in your water use, if you will.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say, Councillor Carr, something we did raise last term as well. And it's something I think we should look into this term around those fixed versus variable was changed not too long ago. And so certainly want to give incentive for people to save money. I think the fixed charge, if you're a small user, that fixed charge is very large compared to the variable. So we should work on that together and bring something forward that might be reasonable this term of council. So Councillor Curry, I think on your third round, Councillor Curry.
I'll just think that you're happy about that. So my only question is on that same thing. So we, Councillor Menard or Chair Menard, and use the word incentives, right? So when Councillor Kavanaugh was talking about the bike lanes and paths, my question is, Mr. Wise, you made the comment that we don't force or require people to do active forms of transportation. What we try to do is encourage and incentivize, or whatever word you want to use. Is there nothing in energy evolution in any of our directives as a committee or as a council that would require people, that would force people or require people to do things? Such as use bicycles instead of cars?
No.
That's all I wanted to hear. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Great questions, and appreciate staff presentation and answers today. So what we're going to do is look to the two motions that have been put forward by Vice Chair Carr. And I know there might be some individual dissents or changes on some of these. So the first is the 2023 budget motion, the tax supported motion, moved by Vice Chair Carr. And I will just ask if that is carried, and we'll get any dissents if there are some after. So is that item carried? Great.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to dissent on items 2 and 5, please.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Brown. Duly noted. And then on the 2023 budget motion, rate supported, is that item carried? Okay, thank you for that. And then on the item as a whole, as amended by those two motion, is that carried for the budget? Okay, thank you very much. There are no in-camera items today. Are there any notice of motion? I mean, Councillor King has a notice of motion for next meeting. So we'll go to you, Councillor King.
I do. Thank you, Chair. And I think Councillor Hill set off some discussion around EV chargers and the fact that we will have a strategy, notwithstanding I am introducing this motion, so I'll just read it into the record. I'll try to be quick because it's slightly lengthy. Whereas on October 24th, 2019, City Council declared a climate emergency for the purposes of naming, framing, and deepening our commitment to protecting our economy, our ecosystems, and our community from climate change. Whereas this declaration provides additional direction to staff for expanded work on the Climate Change Master Plan, Energy Evolution, and the Future Climate Resiliency Plan. Whereas part of this plan has included commitment to supporting the transition to electric vehicles and has installed several electric vehicle charging stations across Ottawa. Transitioning from gas and diesel vehicles to electric vehicles is one of the most important actions required to meet Ottawa's target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to zero by 2050. Whereas the city launched 24 new on-street charging stations, the charging stations are at 12 locations in the urban area, such as Beechwood Avenue, Daly Avenue, Wellington Street West, Cartier Street, Main Street, Laurier Avenue East, whereas each site is equipped with 2 level 2 chargers with which provide 35 to 45 kilometer per hour of charging. Users are charged $2 per hour, whereas the charging stations are part of the city's efforts to support the uptake of electric vehicles in Ottawa. Whereas the project was completed with support from the federal government under the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Program and an affiliate of Hydro Ottawa, whereas privately owned companies as well as organizations such as the Ottawa Airport Authority currently offer charging stations in their paid parking lots and garages, whereas the city has also recently installed charging stations at a city-owned park and ride station at Chapel Hill Park and Ride, and whereas park and ride spaces are purchased and paid for monthly, much like paying for parking across the city, whereas the city continues to review locations and will be making recommendations for additional EV charging in Ottawa, whereas the city of Peterborough approved the installation of 8 parking charging stations for electric cars free of use with paid parking, whereas the public charging stations planned for Peterborough will be free to charge with paid parking, whereas providing free charging aligns with the current public EV charging approach the city already offers, whereas the gradual charging speeds of EV stations may keep drivers longer in the city center that may lead to greater economic activity for downtown businesses, whereas the public stations may help attract visitors to travel and spend extra time in Ottawa that otherwise may not have visited the downtown due to its limited EV charging capabilities, whereas on-street parking rate proposed rates for Ottawa's 2023 budget is set to a maximum of $4 per hour. Therefore, be it resolved, the staff explore the availability to use unspent dollars from the Climate Change Master Plan and Energy Evolution to fund the purchase and retrofitting that may be required to fund the cost of public use EV chargers in already established parking metered spaces. Therefore, be it resolved that this project consider and ensure that A, the appropriate duration and location of time for downtown metered spaces, B, feasibility of locations with proximity to current electrical conduits, such as the newly resurfaced Montreal Road and other complete streets in the city, C, local garages, D, parking enforcement to ensure that a 4-hour parking limit is not exceeded to allow for multiple EV re-energizing per day. E, parking in these spots would be restricted to electric vehicles and only while charging. F, review the opportunity to align with high performance development standards in terms of its requirements for private development to induce developers to add EV chargers, cost recruit through a preferred parking fee for resident parking and or visitor parking at their private developments of multi-unit residential buildings. Therefore, be it resolved, staff report back in Q3 2023 on the feasibility and implementation of this project.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor King. So that'll be considered at this meeting on March 21st, 2023. Are there any other notices of the motion? Okay, any inquiries? Any other business? Okay, and I also want to, I see the former chair of the Environment Committee here with us today. I just want to thank Scott. And the benefit of me is we now have a real name for this committee, but I'm less funny. So thank you and see everyone. So with that, thanks.